Homes are built to stand against nature, but some seem almost impossible to break. There's a steel arch house that can face EF5 tornadoes and still remain standing. People have seen what it can do, and many want to understand how it works and why it is not more common. Yet despite its strength, something unusual surrounds it. Rules have been put in place that stop people from building it freely. Why would a home designed to protect lives be restricted in this way? Join us as we explore why this steel arch home is illegal, and tell us if you think this ban makes sense in the comments. From battlefield to backyard. On July 15, 1946, over 1,000 World War II veterans camped overnight at Port Hueneme, California. They came to buy Quonset huts. The War Assets Administration was selling surplus military buildings for $230 without windows or $288 with windows. Veterans needed homes. America was short millions of housing units after the war, and these metal half-cylinders were the fastest solution anyone had. By the end of that first day, 75% of the 811 available huts sold. The huts sold so fast that veterans slept on the ground to make sure they got one. Families were living in garages, sharing apartments with relatives, doubled up in conditions nobody wanted. The Quonset hut wasn't perfect, but it was shelter you could afford and build. The $230 price for a basic unit was less than most families paid in rent for 6 months. These were 20 feet by 48 feet of corrugated steel with no insulation, no plumbing, and often no electricity when delivered. But veterans added windows, built interior walls, installed utilities, and made them livable. What started as temporary housing became permanent for many families who couldn't afford anything else. The Navy had built 153,000 of these structures during the war. 10 men could put one together in a single day without special training. Now they were flooding the civilian market, and they changed how Americans thought about housing. The Quonset hut didn't start in America. It came from Belgium. In April 1916, during World War I, Major Peter Norman Nissen of the British Army designed a semicircular shelter after watching a roof collapse at Queen University. The trenches needed buildings that could go up fast and stand up to shelling. Nissen created a design using corrugated steel over a wooden frame. 6 men could build one in 4 hours. The record time was 1 hour and 27 minutes. Britain built over 100,000 Nissen huts during World War I, and the design proved itself under fire. When America entered World War II, the Navy needed something similar but better. In March 1941, they gave the George A. Fuller Company 60 days to design a building that unskilled workers could put up quickly anywhere in the world. Otto Brandenburger led the team at Quonset Point, Rhode Island. They kept the curved roof but changed almost everything else. The Quonset measured 20 feet wide by 48 feet long. It used all steel construction instead of wood framing. The panels bolted together without welding. 10 unskilled laborers could build one in a day. The design worked in Alaska's frozen ground, Guam's tropical humidity, North Africa's sand, and Europe's mud. The Navy shipped Quonsets everywhere American forces went. They built 153,000 huts, plus 11,800 larger warehouse versions. On Tinian Island in the Pacific, a Quonset housed the assembly of the atomic bomb before it loaded onto the Enola Gay. The scale of Quonset production during the war showed what American manufacturing could do when motivated. Factories that had been making other products retooled to stamp out curved steel panels. The Navy standardized every dimension so panels from different factories would fit together. Ships carried knockdown Quonsets across oceans. Engineers designed them to handle salt spray, tropical rot, Arctic cold, and desert heat. The same building that worked in Alaska worked in North Africa. Soldiers assembled them on coral atolls where no trees grew. They put them up in jungles where traditional construction would have rotted in months. The adaptability made them more than just buildings. They were tools of war, as important as trucks or radios. The buildings became so common that soldiers stopped seeing them as temporary. After the war ended, the government faced a problem. What do you do with 153,000 steel buildings you don't need anymore? At the same time, 12 million veterans came home to a country that didn't have enough houses. The government started selling Quonsets as surplus. Veterans bought them and turned them into homes, terrace shops, churches, and businesses. In Los Angeles, Roger Young Village housed 750 Quonset huts, sheltering 1,500 families. The conversion of Quonsets into civilian use happened nationwide. Some veterans used them as the core of larger homes, building wood frame additions onto the ends. Others grouped multiple Quonsets together to create more space. Churches bought them for temporary worship spaces that often became permanent. Small businesses used them as shops and warehouses. Farmers turned them into equipment storage and livestock shelters. The versatility came from the simple design. You could cut doors and windows anywhere in the end walls. You could insulate the interior and finish it however you wanted. The steel shell was just the waterproof envelope. Everything else was up to the owner. The village became one of the first places in America where black and white families lived together without official segregation. Universities bought hundreds of Quonsets. Iowa, Northwestern, and Minnesota used them to house students flooding campuses on the GI Bill. Some of those temporary buildings stayed in use into the 1980s. In Nashville, a surplus Quonset became Columbia Studio B on Music Row. Patsy Cline, Johnny Cash, and dozens of other artists recorded there. The curved steel walls created acoustic properties that shaped the Nashville sound. What started as a military necessity became part of American culture, and people who lived in Quonsets discovered something unexpected: the physics of the curve. In 2004, Hurricane Charlie hit Florida's west coast, packing 150 miles per hour winds. The Category 4 storm killed 10 people and caused $14 billion in damage. In Punta Gorda, the hurricane ripped roofs off houses, knocked down trees, and turned debris into projectiles that punched through walls. Scott Rambo's Quonset hut sat in the middle of the destruction. When the storm passed, Rambo walked outside and looked at his building. There wasn't a wrinkle in the panels. Down the street, a flat-roof metal building had collapsed. Traditional houses lost their roofs, but the curved steel arch stood exactly as it had before the storm. The destruction around Rambo's building showed what happens when wind meets traditional construction. Stick frame houses depend on connection between separate pieces. The roof attaches to the walls attach to the foundation. Each connection point is a place where failure starts. Wind gets under roof shingles and peels them back. Once the roof covering goes, water pours in and the sheathing fails. Then the trusses lift off because they're only held down by nails or straps. The whole structure comes apart in stages. A Quonset doesn't have those failure points. The walls and roof are the same piece. The corrugated steel panels bolt together with overlapping seams. Wind can't get underneath to pry anything loose. The entire structure acts as one unit, and the curved shape means there's nowhere for pressure to build up enough to cause damage. The same thing happened in Virginia when an F1 tornado hit Jonesville with 100 miles per hour winds. Marty Mullins watched the tornado destroy his house. When he checked his property afterward, two things survived: his two Steelmaster Quonset huts, one built in 1993 and one bought the year before. In Tennessee, an EF5 tornado with winds over 261 miles per hour destroyed Conta Heisel's farm. Her house was gone, her barn was gone, but her Quonset hut, which she used for hay storage, stood undamaged. The huts that survived revealed something the building industry didn't want homeowners thinking about too carefully. These weren't flukes. The curved roof does something that flat roofs and peaked roofs can't do, and wind hits a flat wall and creates pressure that tries to push the building over. Wind hits a peaked roof and creates uplift that tries to tear the roof off. But wind hits a curved surface and slides around it. The shape doesn't fight the wind. It guides the wind over and past the building. Engineers call this aerodynamic design. Ancient builders used it in arches and domes for thousands of years. The principle is that the arch never sleeps. The curve stays in permanent compression, holding its shape under load. In 2006, researchers Blackmore and Chokri published a study showing that curved roofs reduce uplift forces by 30% compared to standard gable roofs. A year later, the Centre Scientifique et Technique du Bâtiment in France confirmed that aerodynamically designed homes perform far better in hurricanes than traditional construction. The curved shape eliminates the flat walls and sharp corners where wind creates pressure spikes. The Bernoulli effect, which creates lift on airplane wings, works in reverse on a Quonset. Wind engineers study how buildings fail in hurricanes by looking at damage patterns. The most common failure starts at the roof edge. Wind catches the overhang, lifts the edge, and peels the roof back like opening a can. The second most common failure is wall collapse from pressure differences. Wind pushes on the front wall while suction pulls on the back wall and roof. If the connections aren't strong enough, the building explodes outward. Traditional construction tries to prevent this by using hurricane straps, reinforced connections, and impact-resistant materials. But you're still fighting the wind. A Quonset works with the wind. The curve has no edges to catch. There's no overhang to lift. The smooth surface doesn't create the pressure differences that tear buildings apart. Instead of resisting wind through brute strength, the shape simply doesn't give wind anything to push against effectively. The wind speeds up over the curve, but doesn't generate enough lift to damage the structure. And because the entire building is one continuous piece, there's no seam between walls and roof where failure usually starts. The steel itself matters too. Corrugated metal is 5 times stronger than flat metal of the same thickness. The corrugations create rigidity without adding weight. Steel doesn't rot, termites can't eat it, and it won't burn. When engineers tested Quonset huts by firing a 15-pound wooden plank at 100 miles per hour into the panels, simulating hurricane debris, it barely made a dent. The same impact would punch through wood siding or vinyl. The combination of shape and material creates a structure that's nearly indestructible under wind loads. Cost is another factor that gets ignored. A Quonset hut costs $50 to $95 per square foot to build. Traditional stick frame construction costs $150 to $250 per square foot or more. The curved design also distributes loads differently than conventional framing. In a stick frame house, the roof load travels down through the walls to the foundation in straight vertical paths. The weight creates compression in the walls, which is fine until something disrupts the path. Remove a section of wall for a window or door, and you need headers and extra framing to redirect the load. In a Quonset, the loads travel through the curve. The arch shape puts the entire structure in compression, and compression is what steel handles best. There are no concentrated stress points because every part of the curve shares the load. This is the same principle that let ancient Roman aqueducts stand for 2,000 years using nothing but stone blocks in compression. Over 30 years, a Quonset saves $30,000 to $80,000 in maintenance compared to conventional homes. No roof to replace every 20 years. No siding to repair. No structural damage from termites or rot. The building sits there doing nothing but protecting what's inside, which is exactly what a building should do. What they discovered by accident would reshape how people thought about what buildings should be able to do. So why can't you build one on your property in most of America? Because governments made it illegal, and the reasons have nothing to do with safety. The system that says number Santa Cruz County, Arizona made it simple. Their code prohibits metal prefab buildings and Quonset huts for residential use. In Rothbury, Michigan, Ordinance 17 from 1968 states it's unlawful to use any building known as a Quonset hut as a dwelling. Alaska, which housed 20,000 to 30,000 people in military Quonsets during World War II, now bans building new ones. The international building codes that govern most construction in America don't actually exclude Quonsets. The IRC and IBC allow them if they meet structural requirements, but local zoning boards found other ways to block them. Many jurisdictions label Quonsets as agricultural or industrial buildings, which means they can't be used as homes even though people lived in them for decades. Some codes require specific roof pitches or architectural styles that curved roofs can't meet. Homeowners associations write rules requiring tile roofs or certain exterior materials that make Quonsets illegal by default. Some jurisdictions use minimum square footage requirements that Quonsets can meet, but then layer on requirements for separated living spaces and minimum ceiling heights in every room, or window size ratios that curved buildings can't satisfy without expensive custom work. Others require engineered drawings stamped by a local engineer, which adds thousands in costs and delays. Some building departments simply tell applicants that Quonsets aren't allowed, even when the actual code doesn't prohibit them. The homeowner can fight it, hire a lawyer, and maybe win after months or years, or they can build something conventional and get approved in weeks. Most people choose the path of least resistance, which is exactly what the system counts on. The phrase "too weird to be allowed" became law through aesthetic mandates dressed up as safety codes. The financial system blocks Quonsets even when local codes don't. Fannie Mae requires conforming neighborhoods for mortgages. If there are no other Quonsets in the area, appraisers can't find comparable sales, which means they systematically undervalue the property. Mortgage lenders refuse to give construction loans for Quonsets under standard programs. They require 30 to 40% down instead of the 3 to 20% for conventional homes. Their policy says mainstream homes only. Insurance companies classify Quonsets as non-standard structures. The appraisal problem creates a circular trap. Banks won't lend on Quonsets because they're uncommon. They're uncommon because banks won't lend on them. Appraisers need 3 comparable sales within the last 6 months to establish value. In most areas, there are 0 Quonset sales, which means the appraiser has to use their judgment. Most appraisers default to low valuations when they can't find comps, which means the property doesn't support the loan amount. Even when an appraiser wants to value a Quonset fairly, the lending institution's underwriting guidelines often reject anything labeled non-standard. The mortgage system was built around suburban tract homes with wood framing and composition shingles. Anything outside that template gets flagged as high risk, regardless of actual durability or safety. Insurance companies also classify Quonsets as non-standard structures and charge 15 to 25% higher premiums. despite the fact that steel is rated Class 3 non-combustible and survives disasters that destroy insured traditional homes. Insurance software can't even estimate reconstruction costs for curved buildings because the programs weren't written to handle them. The scale of the industries fighting alternatives explains why change is hard. Residential construction in America is a $95 billion per year business. Homeowners insurance brings in $169.6 billion annually. The property and casualty insurance industry tops $1 trillion. These industries have lobbying power. The National Association of Home Builders spent $3.45 million on lobbying in 2024. The Softwood Lumber Board markets with $45 revenue per $1 promotion and states its mission as expanding market opportunities in building codes. The American Wood Council works to make sure wood stays the default building material by influencing code development. The lumber industry's position is easy to understand. Americans build about 1.4 million new homes per year. Almost all of them use wood framing. That's millions of tons of dimensional lumber sold annually. If alternative construction methods took even 10% of that market, it would cost the industry billions. The insurance industry's position is more subtle. They don't openly oppose Quonsets, but they price them out of reach through classification and underwriting rules. An insurance company that charged fair rates for a structure that doesn't file claims would make less money than one that charges high rates for structures that fail in disasters. The whole system is built around managed risk pools where claims happen at predictable rates. A building that doesn't fail disrupts the actuarial models. A structure that people can build themselves, that doesn't need a new roof every 20 years, that doesn't require constant maintenance, and that survives disasters without insurance claims is not a good business model for industries built on recurring revenue. Mortgages depend on 30-year loans. Roofers depend on replacement cycles. Insurance companies depend on claims and rising premiums. A Quonset hut once built asks for nothing. It just sits there being a building. Independence is not a revenue model, so the system labels it non-conforming and moves on. But cracks are showing. In March of 2026, President Trump signed Executive Order 14,394 directing her to remove regulatory barriers to affordable housing. Studies show regulations add $90,000 to the cost of new homes. Modern builders are pushing back. A Pennsylvania family built a 40-foot by 40-foot Quonset for under $35,000. Kristen Grant in Wisconsin put up a farmstead Quonset specifically because of tornado resistance. Rural counties with no zoning give people freedom. Parts of northern Arizona, central Texas, rural Missouri, Cochise County in Arizona, and Park County in Colorado have no building inspections or zoning laws. The pattern of suppression goes beyond Quonsets. Earthship Biotecture lost its architecture license for 17 years for building sustainable homes. Geodesic domes failed code requirements written for 90-degree angles. Shipping container homes got voted into the 2021 International Building Code, but Portland still bans them. Tiny houses hit minimum square footage requirements in most jurisdictions. The common thread is structures that work outside the traditional building industry's control. The Quonset hut survived 185 miles per hour typhoons in the Pacific, bombs in Europe, and jungles in Southeast Asia. It housed millions of soldiers and then millions of civilians. It proved itself over 80 years. It costs less to build, costs less to maintain, and survives disasters that destroy conventional construction. Engineers understand why it works. Homeowners who have them love them. But most Americans can't build one because the system that profits from traditional construction wrote rules to keep alternatives out. The question isn't whether Quonsets are safe. The record proves they're safer than what we're allowed to build. The question is whether the system will ever value resilience and affordability over the business model that keeps people dependent on industries that profit from planned obsolescence and recurring failure. What do you think? Should homeowners have the freedom to build stronger and more affordable homes like Quonset huts? Or do zoning laws and housing regulations still play an important role in protecting communities? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.